Well, Shopify hit a milestone announcing this week that there are now 1 million merchants using its platform, a milestone that many analysts didn't think that they would hit so soon. However, the stock sold off yesterday despite big revenue growth, posting a surprise loss in the quarter. That's only part of the story. Let's talk about the Shopify growth story with Harley Finkelstein, Chief Operating Officer at Shopify, joining us from New York. Harley, thanks so much for being with us. You know, obviously, you know what has dominated the market conversation about these high growth names such as yourself is, well, what does the profit picture look like? When are we going to start to see spending reined in? Shopify continues to spend, and I'm just wondering if you could flesh out, where are your spending dollars going right now? Is it to build the fulfillment network? Is it to create new products to sell to your customers? Is it to acquire those customers? What's hogging some of that bandwidth right now in the stage that you guys are in?
Thanks for having me, Amber and John. So I think what's important to remember is that Shopify started as a profitable company. Our roots, we were bootstrapped, we were profitable in the early days, and we expect to go back to profitability. But right now, as you're sort of seeing from the million merchant, our economic study we put out, and also our earnings, we feel like there's an opportunity for us to help millions of merchants around the world build great businesses. So in terms of where our spending is going, we talked about over the next 5 years, spending about $1 billion on the Shopify Fulfillment Network to help small businesses fulfill their orders better. But also it's going to be on things like acquiring more customers. And so right now, we certainly are in growth mode. We feel like there's a massive opportunity for us to take a lot more market share from other companies, but also to create more entrepreneurs that may not otherwise have been entrepreneurs if not for Shopify. So right now, we're heads down and growing really quickly, and this million merchant milestone is really important to us. It's super impactful to, we think, the world. We announced this morning in our economic impact study that Shopify merchants have created $183 billion worth of economic impact globally. The merchants and the entrepreneurs on Shopify employ more than 1.4 million full-time employees with their businesses. And so Shopify is really driving this entire, what I would just call is this revolution, this entrepreneurial movement, and we're at the center of it.
Well, you also want to help them accelerate that even more, building out this fulfillment network. But you said, I believe yesterday, the company said that's not going to be through building warehouses, which is traditionally how we think about, think about Amazon's fulfillment network is physical, capital-intensive buildings. So if it's not through building warehouses, like what does it look like to try and build out a fulfillment network if it's not kind of doing it yourself?
Right. It's a good question. So I think one of the things you're beginning to see is that Shopify is a lot more than just an e-commerce provider. We really believe we're the world's first retail operating system. And what that means is we are trying to find all the different ways that entrepreneurs and small businesses struggle when they're trying to build a business. So obviously the e-commerce side is what we're best known for. Point of sale, physical retail, we've obviously done a lot of work in as well. But that merchant solutions group, which are things like shipping labels and payments and capital, those are things that these entrepreneurs cannot do on their own. Because we are the third largest online retailer in the US in aggregate, means we can negotiate on behalf of all these entrepreneurs on our platform to give them incredible economies of scale that they couldn't get on their own. And one of those new areas that we think we can be helpful with is on the Shopify Fulfillment Network. What we're doing is we are looking and partnering with existing fulfillment warehouses, 3PLs, all over the US to start, but eventually we're to go global with it, where we're going in there and using Shopify software, we are allowing them to connect to this network so that any of our merchants can put their products directly into those warehouses and using great software can easily fulfill those orders. We are starting with about 7 of these warehouses. All 7 are third-party warehouses, but because we're using a partnership model rather than a build-it-ourselves model, we think we can reduce CapEx in that way.
So some of your merchants are small businesses, some are large businesses, some are very high profile. There's been a lot of the Shopify story told through a very well-known celebrity in Kylie Jenner. Can you give us a little bit more color on, for example, her journey? Because you guys as a business have actively told her story on how big a story she represents within the Shopify story.
I think that's the great part about our business model is that there isn't one particular merchant who, if they left the platform, would adversely affect the business of Shopify. We have 1 million merchants, a very, very long tail. I think the reason that Kylie's story gets so much attention is because this is a person who sat down at her mom's kitchen table and started a small business on Shopify and has grown to be a category leader. But the same story exists for Allbirds shoes or Bombas socks or Fashion Nova for clothing. We are watching entrepreneurs start on Shopify and then become industry disruptors without ever never having to leave the platform. And so the fact they're going from 0 sales to 100 million or $1 billion in sales so quickly on Shopify just shows the sheer scale of what we're building here. And we're seeing a lot more from the macro trend perspective, this entire idea of direct to consumer, whether it's some of the names I mentioned earlier, or it's companies like Movement Watches or Tommy John Underwear. This direct to consumer business model for retail is not a trend. It will be steady state. And Shopify is powering the majority of all your favorite DTC brands globally.
So if I am Kylie Jenner, or if I'm any entrepreneur, I can, and I know I need to have an e-commerce presence. I can take one of two paths. It looks like I can decide to sell my stuff through Amazon and kind of lose my brand, but gain access to their customers. Or I can try and maintain my brand, power myself with Shopify kind of helping me with all that back-end logistics that I might not have the manpower for. So it seems like in an inadvertent way, you guys really are going toe-to-toe with Amazon. How do you think about competing with Amazon, which is this huge giant? And do you think of yourselves as vying for the same type of entrepreneurs, the same type of businesses?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Amber. So to be clear, we don't consider ourselves a competitor to Amazon. In fact, we are a partner of Amazon. We allow our merchants on Shopify to accept Amazon Pay. We have an Amazon channel for merchants where they can cross-sell their products. But more and more, what is happening is that consumers want to buy directly from the people that make the product. And this idea that that marketplaces do give you an audience, but what they really do is they rent you an audience. And what we're seeing is some of the brands on Shopify, most of the brands on Shopify, they want to own the direct relationship with the end consumer, and they cannot do that by listing on a marketplace. So to be clear, we don't think that Amazon is a competitor of ours. What we do see, though, is a shift from these brands, these makers, these great, incredible companies deciding to go direct to the consumer, doing it on Shopify. The way we sort of look at it is that for things that you buy on Amazon, those are the things you may need. Your toiletries, the stuff that you require for your household necessity items. But for the stuff that you want, more and more, we as consumers are buying it directly from a brand on Shopify. And we view what we're doing as really arming the rebels so they can compete with the largest retailers and marketplaces on the planet.
Do you think Amazon views you as a competitor and thus could easily create a service or an offering that essentially takes away your value proposition?
Look, I can't speak for what happens inside of other companies, but what I can say is that I think a lot of the major marketplace, whether it's Amazon or eBay or any others, they want to sell products through their marketplace. And what we're trying to do is we are trying to democratize retail so that a brand can sell direct to the consumer. They own that relationship, they own the profit margin, they own the experience. And with SFN, for example, now merchants can use this incredible network of fulfillment warehouses so they can ship products to the end consumer in boxes that have their brand on it, not some third party's brand. This idea of renting customers from the marketplace, we think is something that brands are moving away from. They want to have that direct relationship.
So, Harley, this growth story has obviously attracted a lot of investors. This year, it's hard to find many stocks that have had the kind of run that yours has had in this market, certainly since your IPO. You would be very hard-pressed to find a similar stock performer. Some of us have read about the marching orders from management not to check the stock price during work hours, or you have to buy Timbits for your team. It reminded me of the story of Research in Motion, now BlackBerry, which had a similar rule in place in the early days. But this year, you guys are on track to generate more than $1.5 billion in revenue, and you would hit that milestone about 7 years faster than BlackBerry did in its own entrepreneurial journey. What's your reaction to that?
Look, we're trying to build the greatest company on the planet in retail. We think that Shopify is becoming the entrepreneurship company for the world, and that's what we're focused on. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think people still believe or assume Shopify is this e-commerce provider, and again, we're the best in the world at that. But more and more, what we're doing is creating this world's retail operating system so that anyone that wants to sell a product can do so at any scale, and we can help them with things like capital and payments and shipping and fulfillment, but also the actual retailing of that product, both online and offline. In terms of the quarter that you mentioned, we announced about $390 million in revenue for Q3. That's up 45% year over year. GMV was almost $15 billion for the quarter. That's up 48% year over year. So we're focused on growing this business, and we think there's an opportunity to get many more millions of entrepreneurs using Shopify around the world. But fundamentally, we want to become the entrepreneurship company for the world, and I think we're on our way to do that.
You mentioned bootstrapping, and a lot of your growth has been organic. Recently, you've started to get into M&A. Your biggest acquisition competition ever with the purchase of that fulfillment network. I'm wondering, we've talked a lot about the IPO market and how it seems to have really soured. It's almost non-existent here in this country. Has that created a lot more buying opportunities for Shopify as they're looking at companies that, that might have gone public, but now as access to the public markets have soured, it allows you to scoop them up?
So you're right. I mean, we acquired Six River Systems for about $450 million a little while ago. The truth is, if you look at every one of the acquisitions we've ever made, starting back with that one of those original acquisitions in Toronto with Jet Cooper, we've always looked to acquire companies where we get incredible leadership and really a deep understanding of the product area. We typically and have not really bought companies for revenue reasons. We bought it for leadership and for the product. Six River Systems is probably the greatest group of human beings on the planet thinking about robotics from an efficiency perspective in a warehouse, and we think that bringing them into the SFN, into this fulfillment network, is going to expedite things in an incredible way and make things a lot more efficient. So I wouldn't say we're timing things in terms of what the market is doing. We're just looking to buy incredible companies with great leaders and then let them do their life's work inside of Shopify. If you look at almost all our acquisitions, the leaders and the founders of those companies are still running very large areas inside of Shopify. That is quite unique, and I think it's because we invite these founders in to do their life's work at a massive scale inside of Shopify. But we're always looking to figure out whether or not there's another acquisition that we should make. For right now, there is no immediate plans, but I think we've been quite successful in integrating and bringing in great leaders to help run different parts of our business.
Well, Harley, the other good thing about robots, they don't check the stock price during trading hours, so there's no Timbit cost. Yeah.
Harley, do you check the stock price? Be honest. We won't tell Toby.
To be honest, I've not checked it today. Yesterday, I was on the earnings call, and so I did check it to see how it was doing relative to the news we put out there. But I know, it feels a little bit gimmicky to say we don't check the stock price, you have to buy Timbits. We really don't. We really do believe that in the long run, the stock price will reflect the value of the company. Day to day, it may not do that. There's a lot of noise, but we want to build a 100-year company. We want to do it headquartered in Canada, and we think we can absolutely do that. We think we're on our way.
All right. Well, it's up a little bit today, Harley, so you don't have to check. That's
you got to buy me Timbits, Amber.
Is that how it works? Okay. Harley Finkelstein is the Chief Operating Officer at Shopify. Thanks so much for joining us.